Welcome into another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I'm your host for another half hour where we're going to talk all things motorsports. And let me tell you, from Markham to Richmond, there was no shortage of action across the motorsports world, and in London, there was no shortage of controversy when it came to crowning the newest Formula E champion. All that and more on tonight's episode of The Racing Report. Thanks for sticking with us. And let's go ahead and jump right on into things and begin in the world of Formula One, because we got some massive news on Wednesday that Isack Hadjar has been ruled out of this weekend's Dutch Grand Prix after suffering a wrist injury during the F1 summer break. As a result, Liam Lawson will drive alongside Max Verstappen at Red Bull this weekend, while Yuki Tsunoda is coming back into the F1 race and will return with Racing Bulls, partnering alongside Arvid Lindblad. So, that's what's going on this weekend. If you don't see Isack Hadjar this weekend at the Dutch Grand Prix, that is why. He's injured. They've replaced him with Lawson, and as a result, given Yuki Tsunoda the call-up. Now, that's not the only time Yuki Tsunoda is going to be in the news this weekend. We're going to coming up here in just a little bit, about 5 or so minutes time. We've got some IndyCar news that links Yuki Tsunoda, so get ready for that. Meanwhile, in the world of Formula One, Williams has confirmed its driver lineup for the next year and potentially even the foreseeable future, because Alex Albon has signed a contract extension that will keep him with the team through the 2027 season, while Carlos Sainz has signed a multi-year agreement to keep him with Williams for the near future. So that's great news for fans of both drivers, as well as fans of Williams, getting themselves some stability there. So Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon both returning to Williams for next year. That's one team that we've already can cross off the list of the Formula One silly season and say this is what the Williams lineup is going to look like next year. More in Formula One, and this is more so of the FIA specifically, but the FIA has officially lifted sanctions that were levied to Russian and Belarusian drivers following Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. This means that Russian and Belarusian drivers can now race under their own flag. So if you were not familiar with this, drivers from Russia, like say Robert Schwartzman last year at the Indy 500, he was not allowed to compete under the Russian flag, and he had to compete under the Israeli flag because he had some family. He was born in Israel, but of course raised in Russia. So, poor guy, you can't pick where you're born, that's for sure. No shortage of controversy at all between any of those two countries. But regardless, that's great news for everybody. Of course, Danny Kvyat's been racing under an Italian license. Now he can race under a Russian license as well. Lots of drivers from Russia finally able to run under their home country's flags. So that's at least good news for there. But there is one thing to note about this FIA decision, and it's that the ban on FIA-sanctioned events taking place in both Russia and Belarus is still in effect. It is still banned. We won't see the Russian Grand Prix coming back anytime soon, nor will you see any type of FIA-sanctioned race taking place in either country. So those are the newest updates that we have for the world of Formula One. Let's talk about IndyCar. Let's go ahead and talk about IndyCar because there's a lot to debate. More so later on in this show, but for right now in the news, the first thing we talked about last week, how IndyCar unveiled the first 8 races, the schedule for the first 8 races of 2027. Well, not long after that, Road America came out and said, hey, we got our date too. Road America will host its 2027 IndyCar date on June 27th, 2027, becoming, of course, the most recent IndyCar race to announce its schedule for next year. Of course, no other IndyCar races outside of what we talked about last week, those first 8 races, as well as Road America have been announced yet. So tracks like Nashville, Mid-Ohio, tracks like Markham even, we don't know where they're going to slot on the schedule for next year, but hopefully we'll find out here in the next coming weeks. Now here's that piece of Yuki Tsunoda news that I told you to keep monitoring, and I realize that it's a bit less than 5 minutes into the show, but regardless, here's that Yuki Tsunoda news. Apparently, Yuki Tsunoda could be joining IndyCar with Meyershank Racing in 2027. Now, that's according to motorsport.com. The website says Tsunoda is, quote, vying for the number 66 entry, which is, of course, being vacated by Marcus Armstrong, who is going to take over the number 60 car to replace the departing Felix Rosenqvist, who, of course, is going to Arrow McLaren, going back to Arrow McLaren, I should say, for 2027 to pair alongside Pato Ward and Scott Dixon. So, when reached for comment, according to the article, Meyershank Racing said that it had not yet decided anything, and that the team is still looking at all kinds of options. Of course, that talks about the some people linking possibly Mick Schumacher to that ride, but now it appears that Mick's going to have to look elsewhere. Maybe, possibly. Yuki Tsunoda takes that role, and of course, more former F1 drivers coming over to IndyCar. But I think we're getting the right F1 drivers. I think that's what's important to note, at least in my opinion. I think it's the IndyCar the Formula One drivers that are coming over here are drivers that are not F1 rejects. I don't want to call them F1 rejects. They're drivers who just didn't pan out in Formula One, but they're still plenty successful in their own right, and plenty talented in their own right, and deserving of racing in a top open wheel series. And thankfully, IndyCar provides that for a lot of those drivers, even though it might not be Formula One. And don't also think about it as like a step back. I don't think that that's the right idea either. I think for Tsunoda, he could very well make a living in Japanese Super Formula if he wanted to, but he'd rather go to IndyCar because I think there's more prestige. There's more history. There's more. It's arguably bigger than Japanese Super Formula, so I think it's the right decision overall. But we'll have to see what happens and who eventually gets that number 66 ride with Meyershank Racing for 2027. And now let's talk about a bit of old news. In case you missed it over the weekend, the first day of practice at the brand new Markham circuit in Canada, Markham, Ontario, was postponed because the track was not finished. No, the track was not finished in time when the series got there, and it was very frustrating for a lot of fans who purchased attendance to be at the race on Friday, only to be told, basically, at the last minute, hey, this is just not going to go forward at all. We haven't finished the track yet, and there were still a lot of things to finish with that track. Still tire barriers needing to be placed. In fact, I believe they were even short on tire barriers at some point. They had to roll in tire barriers. I think I read from Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, which, by the way, is also in the news. Stay tuned for that. And so just a lot of problems. And as a result of this, the promoter, Green Savory Race Promotions, who also promotes St. Petersburg, Mid-Ohio, and Portland, received public flack, not just from fans, but then also from IndyCar itself, with President Doug Bowles saying, quote, IndyCar is incredibly disappointed that our promoter was not able to complete the track build on time, despite significant support from our team on site. That's from Doug Bowles himself. So a lot of controversy when it came to getting that track done. But once the track was finished, I thought it was a pretty good race. Of course, we'll talk about that later on coming up in the show. But for now, let's go ahead and put aside the IndyCar news for right now. Let's talk about some Formula E news, because with the season now being over in the all-electric Formula Series, we've got some silly season news and a lot to cover. So, first of all, Maximilian Günther has announced that he has left DS Penske following the final race of the season in London. He is rumored to be moving over to Envision Racing next season. And now Envision, remember, is completely clearing house. Both Joel Eriksson and Sebastian Buemi will not return to that team. So that means that we'll be waiting and seeing who will pair alongside Günther and when Günther will be officially announced as the next driver for Envision Racing. Of course, that's just rumored. Could happen, could not happen. But honestly, I am leaning toward that's likely going to be how it plays out. But he's not the only driver who's left his team from Formula E. In fact, Norman Nato has now announced that he has left the Nissan Formula E team after that finale in London. And for him, he says that he's starting a new chapter in his life. He's not been linked so far to any Formula E vacancies, and it could be possible that his time in the championship has officially come to an end. And on that note, let's real quick break down the current confirmed entries in Formula E. Well, I shouldn't say entries, the confirmed driver pairings or lineups in Formula E right now, and it's quite slim. So first of all, Jaguar has only confirmed Antonio Felix da Costa. Citroën has confirmed its two drivers will be Jean-Eric Vergne and Nick Cassidy. We already knew that. Andretti is staying status quo with Jake Dennis and Felipe Drugovich. Nissan will only have Oliver Rowland because of Norman Nato's announcement. And then Opel recently announced that Théo Pourchaire will drive for the team full-time next season. But that's it. Those are the only confirmed drivers and team combinations that we have so far in Formula E. Now remember, there's 22 open seat or 22 seats available in Formula E. So to only have a handful confirmed so far definitely is going to make for a very interesting and fun off-season to see who lands where, who re-signs where, or who moves out of the series and who moves into the series. We'll keep tabs on that going forward. But on that note, let's go ahead and take our first break of the show. And when we come back, we don't have any really supercars news to discuss, though they are in action this weekend in Queensland. But we will talk about some IMSA news and a boatload of NASCAR news, so you won't want to miss any of that. More Racing Report coming up after this. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks again so much for sticking with us through that break. Now we're talking about closed wheels. The IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Series has some interesting news that broke over the past week. And that first is that Action Express Racing says it will return to Le Mans next season after sitting out the 24-hour race this year. The team made that decision to sit out this race in order to focus on getting better in their main IMSA championship. But now, of course, Jack Aitken leading the championship standings. The team has decided, yep, we're ready, we're coming back, and we're going to race Le Mans again next year. So that'll be, I believe, their fourth attempt at Le Mans. And, of course, the GTP Hypercar program just allowing for things like that. Just a great sign there. So nice to see more IMSA teams being able to go over and run Le Mans, especially next year. It's a little under a year away, but hey, never too early to get excited for the weekend of Le Mans. But let's talk about now, as we put that aside. As I said, unfortunately, not really a lot of supercars news to discuss, or there are, but it's going to take too long to really explain everything that's going on. So if you want to check it out, I always like speedcafe.com and V8 Sleuth. Those are great websites if you want to keep up to date on the latest supercars news. But we do have a supercars race coming up this weekend. 3, of course, the whole event, and we'll talk about that coming up later on in the show and when you can watch those races. But for now, let's go ahead and talk about NASCAR news, because in the current state, NASCAR is not dropping the schedule all at once, so we have to piece together the schedule ourselves with these independent announcements. And so the first announcement is that Homestead Miami will once again host the championship weekend. That'll be November 12th through the 14th of 2027. Also, we got the news that Chicagoland will indeed return to the NASCAR schedule for 2027, bringing again with it the ARCA Menard Series, the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and the Cup Series. Of course, that race will now be held June 25th through 27th, because remember we talked last week, Iowa Speedway was announced as the new 4th of July date location. And this also means that the Chicago Street Course will not return again in 2027. So for the past what will be 2 years, we'll have no Chicago Street Course, but we will be back at Chicagoland. We might get more details on that going forward, but as of right now, we do have the city of Chicago confirming that indeed it will not take place. And of course, with NASCAR's announcement that they're going back to Chicagoland, that kind of proved it. But that's what we can confirm right now. In other news, Pocono has announced that it will host a triple header when its NASCAR weekend rolls around. It will have the Truck Series, the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and the Cup Series from June 11th to the 13th. Now, of course, that means that the ARCA Menard Series will not return to Pocono, so that's something to keep in mind there. Meanwhile, Kansas Speedway has announced its 2 dates for next season. It will have its first weekend in May. That'll be May 8th through 9th. and then again in October 1st through the 3rd. The Truck Series will join the ARCA Menard Series during that May date, and then the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series will join both the Truck and the ARCA Series, along with the Cup Series for that fall date. Here's that Canadian Tire Motorsports Park news that I talked about, or Moss Sport, for some of you who might have been around a little bit longer than I have been, or other viewers. The Craftsman's Truck Series will return to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park for the first time since 2019, September 5th, 2027, so that's Labor Day weekend. What more could you ask for? Finally, Truck Series going back to Canadian Tire. That's news that I think is very welcome in the world of NASCAR. A lot of people thrilled to see that announced on Wednesday. Also, Gateway has announced that it will host its NASCAR weekend August 21st through 22nd with the Cup Series and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. And then Richmond Raceway will open the chase with both the Cup Series and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series September 10th through 11th, 2027. Of course, this means now that the Truck Series will not return, but the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series will, and again, it'll open the chase for both of those. At least that's what it says. So we'll see how the full schedule plays out going forward. One thing we can confirm, unfortunately, one track that will not return to the NASCAR schedule next year outside of the Chicago Street Course is amid the IHRA fallout, which, holy cow, you're going to want to read some of that. Look, it's too much for me to cover in a 30-minute show. I would literally need an entire 30-minute show by itself to just discuss what's going on right now with the IHRA. But because of all of that that's going on, that means that Rockingham Speedway will not host a single NASCAR event in 2027. Definitely a very disappointing announcement for that track after it's really come back with strong numbers. A lot of people love the fact that Rockingham is back on the NASCAR schedule, even if it's only for the Truck Series and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and the ARCA Series. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, I think a lot of people saw this coming when the IHRA was buying up tracks left and right, and now, unfortunately, there's a serious risk for a lot of those tracks to be sold to other owners, potentially land developers. It's not a good situation right now. So we got to keep monitoring that. Hopefully, Rockingham Speedway will be able to return to some kind of NASCAR schedule in 2028. It's just right now, it's way too soon to tell, and that might even be wishful thinking at this point. But outside of the schedule news, let's talk about some of the drivers, silly season, whatnot news. This was surprising. We learned this over the weekend, over the course of earlier this week. Hendrick Motorsports has signed officially Connor Zilisch to be the new driver of the number 48 Ally Chevrolet beginning in 2028. He'll replace, of course, the retiring Alex Bowman. That was a very big, shocking bombshell to get earlier this week. Of course, not really that's surprising. It's something that had been rumored and had been talked about, been reported even. In some cases, it's just now, it's officially official. Connor Zilisch will replace Alex Bowman at Hendrick Motorsports in 2028. Also in the Cup Series news, this is great. I love seeing this. Ty Gibbs is going to run a special M&M's paint scheme to honor Kyle Busch coming up at Bristol on September 19th, and it'll be the first time that M&M's has appeared on a NASCAR car since its last race with Kyle way back in 2022 at Phoenix Raceway. Great to see this gesture by everybody involved. Love this car. Car looks great, by the way, and you know what? I have to say, it would be the perfect ending, perfect storybook ending, not really ending, but perfect way to storybook this season if Ty Gibbs were to sweep Bristol and especially do it in a Kyle Busch tribute car at the track that Kyle loved and dominated at so often. So good luck to Ty Gibbs as we go to Bristol here in about a full month's time. We'll see if he can pull off the Bristol sweep. Also in news, Hendrick Motorsports says that Corey Day will return to the organization in 2027 to again compete in the full O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, driving the number 17 HendrickCars.com Chevrolet. So Corey Day, even though he's not going to replace Alex Bowman, he is still a part of Hendrick Motorsports' future in regard of the development ladder and in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. So good news there for him, though some of his fans might not be too happy about that. Especially if you've seen Twitter over the week, jeez Louise, there's one guy on there that really doesn't like that move, and I won't name names, but if you know, you know. In other news, Front Row Motorsports confirmed last week that Noah Gragson will return to the team in 2027, so that is another possible landing spot for Josh Berry that's now been closed. He's still on the outside looking in, trying to find a spot for next year. Remember, he's not being retained by the Wood brothers. They're opting to replace him with Jesse Love for 27. So Josh Berry still on the outside looking in, trying to get a cup ride before it's too late. Final piece of NASCAR news here real quick before we take our second and final break of the show. Colin Brown will return to the Truck Series and Colleague Racing to drive the number 25 Ram free agent truck this weekend at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Love seeing Colin Brown come back to the Truck Series. I love the fact that he's making all of these sporadic Truck Series starts, especially on road courses, and now, of course, an oval for him at New Hampshire. Love to see that. Love to see Colin Brown back in the Truck Series. He's a staple of that early 2010s, late 2000s Truck Series. If you remember him racing at all, it was a lot of fun to see him race. So anyway, that's it for the NASCAR news. We're going to go ahead and take our second break of the show. And when we come back, we're going to recap all the races that happened this past weekend. And then we're going to get you ready for the glut of races coming up this weekend. So much, so you won't want to miss that, especially if you plan on watching as many as you possibly can. More Racing Report coming up after this. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Once again, let's go ahead and just get right on into it. We got a lot to cover from this past week of racing. Of course, first of all, we'll start off in the NASCAR realm. NASCAR was in Richmond, and the Truck Series kicked things off, or at least tried to kick things off on Friday night until they were ultimately postponed due to rain. Had to run on Saturday afternoon, and Caden Honeycutt scored another victory in the Truck Series. This guy is on a tear between him and Lane Riggs. I am very excited to see what that championship battle is going to be like coming up this later on this year. Whew. Not going to want to miss the Truck Series final couple races. The chase in the Truck Series is going to be real good, I can tell you that. But then in the Cup Series, it's Joey Logano. Joey Logano, who now has won 2 races over the past, basically since over the past month, and over the past 6 races has gained 11 spots in the points standings. So we are seriously, I said this on my podcast, Racing with Rob and Roller, if you want to give it a listen. At this point, I don't believe even year Logano is a fluke. I actually believe there might be something to this at this point, because he looked awful at the start of the season, and now suddenly he's rattled off 2 wins in the last 6 events, and he very well could be in play, peaking at just the right time in order to make a solid championship push, especially once all those points reset. It might still be hard for him, because he doesn't have the stage points that maybe some of the other drivers that are vying for the title do, say Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, Ryan Blaney, guys like that. But it's not impossible. We've seen this guy sweep rounds of the chase when it was the playoff knockout format before. It's not entirely impossible to see Logano do it again in a standard 10-race chase. We'll just see, but at this point, I'm not going to say don't bet against Logano. I'm not going to say to bet against the Logano. I think that even year Logano might have something going for it. But either way. Moving on now into the world of IndyCar. Of course, we had the first ever race at the new streets of Markham. And of course, it got to a little bit of a delay. I liked the course, though. I thought it was a really good course. I think that hairpin was equal parts great and stupid at the same time. It definitely created for some awesome and exciting passing opportunities. Definitely gave a lot of talking points for that race. But in the end, who saw Marcus Ericsson beating Roman Grosjean to the victory? Now, that was Marcus Ericsson's 5th career victory in the IndyCar Series and his first with Andretti. And of course, he does it by denying his former F1 rival his first victory in open wheel competition, period, since GP2 in 2011. That is the last time Roman Grosjean stood on the top step of a podium in a major open wheel race. That was quite some time ago. In fact, there are probably people watching this show right now who are not even alive for that. If you really want to think about that, that is That is really a long time. And of course, Grosjean was dejected, sad, upset, but also at the same time, he was happy with the podium because he didn't even expect to be anywhere near there. But it turns out, you know what? Pit strategy does wonders. He got so lucky. He stayed out after the first caution and then got a lucky caution again when he finally did make his pit stop, and he was able to make that whole race basically on 2 stops, which was unfathomable, I think, for most people, but Grosjean managed to make it happen. Of course, the tires were not up to temperature by the time Ericsson got to him, but still, what a race. Great job there. Now let's talk about Formula E. Lots of manufacturer drama. Lots of manufacturers getting involved and kind of playing out how things were. Of course, race 1, Pascal Wehrlein won that one, and then that kind of helped him vault himself back into the championship lead, or keep the championship lead, I should say, before Taylor Barnard became Formula E's youngest winner at the age of 22. And of course, Pascal Wehrlein was crowned the champion, but if Jake Dennis was not too happy with how things played out, even though, you know, he benefited, Wehrlein benefited, but neither of them were really too happy about it. But in other news, Kyle Larson completed a completely unplanned double. He went out and finished, I believe, in the 5th or 6th at Richmond, and then thankfully the Knoxville Nationals got postponed due to weather, or not postponed, but delayed significantly due to weather. He was able to fly all the way from Richmond to Knoxville, Iowa, and win. You want to know who finished 3rd, though? My man Casey Kane, 3rd in the Knoxville Nationals, Kyle Larson 1st. Let's talk about the races coming up this weekend. We got a lot of them. NASCAR's in New Hampshire, kicking things off with the Truck Series Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on FS1. Cup Series follows Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time on USA. IndyCar has their inaugural Freedom 250 Grand Prix of Washington, D.C. That pre-race, they keep saying the race starts, no, the pre-race is at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Fox, with the race officially set for 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so be aware of that. Don't tune in too early and then wonder where the racing is. The Dutch Grand Prix is this weekend. Formula One back after its long summer break. The sprint race is set for Saturday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, while the actual Grand Prix is set for 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Both of those, of course, streaming on Apple TV. Supercars are in Queensland for the Ipswich Super 440 this weekend. Race 1 is set for Friday at 10:45 p.m. Eastern Time, with Race 2 following at 2:15 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. So that's actually a few hour difference. It's not actually a full day, it's a few hour difference. But Race 3 is set for Sunday at 1:20 a.m. Eastern Time. The Arca Menard Series is also in action this weekend. They're going to the Springfield Mile for one of their first dirt races of the year. That race is set for Sunday at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on FS1. The IMSA is in VIR, though not with the WeatherTech Sports Car Challenge. The Michelin Pilot Challenge gets things kicked off Saturday at 2 o'clock or 2:10 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock, while the Michelin GT Challenge follows Sunday at noon on NBC. Big NBC. Don't need cable to watch it, but it is also available to stream on Peacock. The Kyle Busch Invitational for the U.S. Legend Cars is this weekend as well. That'll start Friday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time from Bowman Gray Stadium. It'll be streaming live and free on both Flow Racing and the NASCAR channel. USAC is in action for the Bettenhausen 100 at the Illinois State Fairgrounds Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Flow Racing. Cars Tour is in Anderson Motor Speedway, that's in South Carolina, Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. High Limit Sprint Cars have a couple events this weekend. Friday, they're at Tulare at 8:30. Saturday, they're at Placerville at 8:30. And then the World of Outlaws Sprint Cars, Friday, they're in Ogilvie Raceway. And then Saturday, they are at Jackson Motorplex. Those both races will be 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time is when the hot laps start. That is it for this week's episode of the Racing Report. Thanks so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. For WTHR, my name is Rob Peeters, and this has been another episode. Keep watching racing, and we'll be back again next week for more.